Over the time I've been doing transition pictures, one name kept coming up again and again and again. And the reason I didn't do the pictures for him was because I didn't think I could pronounce his name. I thought it'd be really embarrassing to try. And so I skipped him every time. But loads of people have asked for transition pictures with this guy. His name is Israel Kamakawiwoʻole, also known as Iz, which is helpful. He's the guy with the ukulele who sang Somewhere Over the Rainbow. You've heard it a million times. It's in movies, it's in TV shows and commercials. And he died at the age of 38 in 1997. The reason was that he was a really big guy. About 757 pounds he weighed at his peak, and was averaging about 450 pounds. But you can't be that size and expect your heart to keep on working. And so he developed cardiac problems and respiratory problems, and these eventually overtook him. He only became successful in 1993, I think, and enjoyed 4 years of massive recognition and success. He was a born-again Christian, which I thought would make his transition pictures very, very interesting. But 38 is still incredibly young to go. And when I went into his energy, there was a hole through which he had fallen. And he landed on what looked like a banister. It wasn't a banister, but it looked like the banister on an escalator in a shopping mall. And he slid down it. When he flew off the end of the banister, he went down another hole, and below that was a fast-flowing river. And he looked up and thought, that's it. That was my life. Before he could think more, away he went. The river carried him off. And it was in terraces, which is very, very interesting. I've not seen that before. It went down and down and down. Wasn't sure initially what that was. I figured it out later. But he went down and down, and he was deposited in that metaphorical meet and greet cave I always see. There's no real cave, it's just in my head. But it's how I get to understand what they're feeling as they cross over. Interestingly, there were two of him. There was the one that stood up, and there was the one that stayed in the water. And what these terraces had done was shake him free of his self-image as a large guy, a guy with encumbrances, a guy with impediments due to his size. That guy was in the water behind him, and he was free of that now. So there were two kinds of self here. There was the mortal self, the 757-pound guy, and the soul self that existed separate from that and which had now been released. He felt happy but also puzzled. He didn't quite know where he was or how to marry what he was seeing with what he'd been told he would see. And he thought, this must be the first stage of getting to heaven. He walked over to the tunnel, this tunnel I always see, this kind of metaphorical passageway to the light. And he looked at it and he thought, I'll never make it up there. I can't climb that slope. There were still remnants of his mortal self imprinted on his soul's ID. In his mindset, his consciousness, he could not climb hills. Yet, of course, he could. In reality, because he was now free of that. But he tried because you can't avoid the current. The current pulls you up anyway. He got halfway, though, and thought, I can't do this. I'm stuck. At which point, in the same way that there was a river that brought him into this place, another one spewed out of the chamber where the light is at the top. It just spewed water down the tunnel towards him. So I went into his consciousness, because he seemed paralyzed at this point. I went into his consciousness and looked out through his eyes. He doesn't have eyes, but through his perception. And instead of water, which is what I was seeing, it was like silt. Or if you ever walked on volcanic ash or something, it was like that. Because by virtue of stepping into it, it supported your feet. Whereas water would have carried you away, silt supports you and you can use its stability to climb, which is what he did. And it took him up to the light. He was convinced that this was part of entering heaven. Yeah, Jesus wasn't there, but maybe Jesus was beyond the light. And I have no idea, maybe. But he didn't see it as anything other than another stage towards his eternal life. He felt exhilarated and expectant and uplifted and joyful. And with that spirit of joy, he stepped into the light and he went. What I was left with from these pictures was that when he sang, that was his soul self saying to the world, the real me is in here. Don't judge me by the flesh, the size. It was his soul that sang, and his soul that was uplifted, and his soul that was joyous, and his soul that went into the light. In real life, this is what we deal with every day. People judging us by what we look like, how we dress, what car we drive, how much money we have. It's a distraction. It's just junk. It doesn't matter. What matters is how we show our soul to the world, how we demonstrate who we are. And that's what I learned from Israel Kamakawiwoʻole.